Okay, so today is the last class, right? So basically what we are going to do today is to have a revision, okay? So it won't take long, right? So I will briefly go through what we have, what you have learned, right? And what we have introduced, right, in this subject, in this semester. And then we will have the presentation for today, right? So there are two groups, right? Group 5 and Group 6 to present, okay? So then I think we can finish our class earlier, right, today. And so first, for the revision, okay? This is important for your exam, okay? So first, let's take a look to the teaching plan to look at the topic that we have covered in this semester, right, in this subject. So basically, why we need to know EIA, right? So the idea is because you are part of the industry, right? So you work for, most of you work for the construction projects, right? So when we develop, right, so the sustainable concept, right, is important for our society, right? Because so the concept is basically why we need to have EIA, right? Ultimately, we want to have sustainable development, right? So that is what is introduced, right, in our first lecture. So that is we don't want to reduce the resources for our future generation because of our development now, right? Because of our current development. Okay, so this is the idea. So we introduced environmental impact assessment, right? So basically, this is a means, right, that we want to enforce sustainable concept in our development projects, right? So in the project level, in Hong Kong, right, we have the EIAO, right, the regulations to enforce this requirement in the development process, so that we won't have a development that will have major or significant impact to our environment, right? And in EIA, the environment concept is broad, right? So you know there are many different types of impacts that may generate by our development to our environment, right? So the ultimate aims is to let you know under the Hong Kong EIAO, right, what we have to do in order to fulfill the requirement, and also to ensure that our development projects, right, will not adversely affect the environment. Okay, so that's why we go through the detailed process, steps, and method, right, under the EIAO. So most of the topics here, right, the topics introduced here is about the different steps, right, involved. So including, right, in week 2, we talk about screening, right? And then week 4, scoping, right? In week 3, we look at, we have our guest, right, if you remember, right, Clara from the EPD, right, to talk about the Hong Kong legal EIAO system, right? And then, so basically, she also introduced the process, right? And then also, after scoping, right, the other steps is impact prediction and evaluation, right? And then we need to, right, after evaluation, we may think that there are significant impacts, right? Or after prediction, we predict that we may have significant impact. So we have to propose mitigation measures, right? So for mitigation, right, remember the principle is we want to first avoid, right? If we can't avoid, when we try to minimize, right? And if we can't minimize, then we have to compensate, right, for the impact. So this is about impact mitigations, right? So and also we look at after carrying out the EI study, we have to prepare the report, right? So we talk about the EI reporting, right? What we should put in the report. So this report is both for decision making and also for collecting opinions from the involved stakeholders, affected stakeholders, including the public, right, or other government departments, right, interested party, right, etc. And then, very importantly, it should support the decision maker to make a decision on whether our proposed development is acceptable or not, right, based on the impact to the environment. And so we also introduce, right, here throughout the EIA process, right, remember especially when we carry out the EIA study, right, we have to do the major work involved is the impact predictions and evaluation, okay? So for these two parts, we will use lots of numbers, right, in our process. So that's why we introduce the measurements, right? So we have to know the scale of measurement. What are the properties of the number we are using, right, for comparison, right, to introduce a particular types of impact, right, how we use it, and how we can compare, right, the numbers. And also we talk about the methodology, right? Methodology is also important here. So throughout the EIA steps, right, different steps, right, we will have different methods to carry out the different processes, okay? But except those, right, methodology for impact prediction, right? Remember, for impact prediction, we can have many different types of method. This is a creative process, right? But generally, we can classify the method into quantitative method and qualitative method, right? Quantitative method like using mathematical models, right? Or carrying out experiment or producing physical mock-up, right? So these are quantitative method, but we may also employ qualitative, that is mainly by professional judgment, right? Or comparing similar case, using similar case as a base, right, for comparison. So, but for those, right? So throughout this subject, right, you learn about the some mathematical model. Okay, for example, for air and noise impact analysis, right? But I think this is not too difficult for you, right? The air dispersion model, right? We introduce it, right? And also for noise, I think those equations will be very familiar to you for those of you who study the building services too, right? But for EIA, right, this mathematical model or equation is not that important, right, for you, okay? Because it is normally the environmental engineer who really carry out the EIA study work, right? The impact prediction and evaluation work, right? So the model mathematical equation introduced is to let you have some idea on how we carry out those impact prediction, okay? But you do not really need to remember them, okay? But besides those methodology for impact prediction, right, with those mathematical model, right, the other methods, right, method for screening, method for scoping, right, the method to do the evaluations, those are important, okay, because these are very much process related, EIA process related, and those method is used to in order to satisfy the requirement at different stages of the EIA process, okay? And then, so after submitting the report and then obtaining, right, in Hong Kong, the process is to, for a designated project, right, the proponent will need to apply for environmental permit before he can start his work, right? So after submitting the EIA report, after the report is approved, then the proponent, right, will be able to apply for the environmental permit, right? And in the permit, it will specify what has to be done, right, during the project implementation stage, right? So when the project is started, then we need to carry out the EM&A normally, right? The environmental monitoring and audit, right? So because we want to, right, verify that our prediction is correct, right? And also whether those mitigation measures is working, right? Or any discrepancy, any accident right? During the project implementation stage, right? So we will have to carry out some remedial actions. So this is basically the EIA process, right? Under the EIAO in Hong Kong. But remember, in project level, actually, if we want to mitigate the impact, right? There are limited solution we can have, right? Because the project is already fixed, right? For Schedule 2, except for Schedule 3, right? Those feasibility study is actually considered as a kind of SEA, right? Strategic Environmental Assessment, right? So for those feasibility study, the project, for example, the scope of a particular area, right, to develop is not well defined yet or not confirmed yet, right? So there are lots of room for change, right? So this is the idea of SEA, right? So at project level, we may not be able to do much, right? But and it is the best way, right, to influence to input sustainable concept, right, at the earliest possible stage, right? So this is the stage for formulation of the PPP, right? There is the policy, plans, and program, right? The high-level decision-making process. So that's why we have SEA, right? So we introduced in last week, right, about SEA. So SEA allow us to input the support on sustainable measures, right? Input the sustainable idea into the decision process early, so that when the plan is formulated and then it generates projects, right, in the later stage, the impact from the project itself is already much reduced, right? So we don't have to mitigate much impact, right, when we actually need to implement the project. Okay, so these are the content, right, that we have covered for EIA. So then for this subject, right, so up for this for assessment of this subject, right, so there are two parts, right, for coursework, right, so they are 40%, right, that is your group projects, right, so including your oral presentation and also your reports, right, the group assessment and also your individual contribution in the report. Then for the exam, right, it makes up 60%, okay, so this is quite a lot. So for the examinations, we have in this year, we will have face-to-face exam, okay, face-to-face exam. So last year, because we have online exam, right, so we use the open book method. So the question for last year is case-based, right? So there is you are given a particular case and then you have to apply what you have learned, the principle, right, specific to the case, okay? But this year, because we use the face-to-face method, right, it is not open book, right? So if you have to read a case, think about a case, and then from your memory find out those points, right, it will be too long, right? The time is not enough. So we'll in this year, the exam question will be not case-based, okay, but it will be for general situation. Okay, the question is for general situation, not case specific. Okay, and the question paper will have 5 questions. Okay, 5 questions, and each question carry 24 marks, right? So and you only need to answer 4 questions. Okay, there is 4 questions out of 5. Okay, so 25 marks 1, so altogether, right, 100 marks. Okay, and in order to not make you not so confused, right, in preparation of your exam, right, the question, right, all the question is will just talk about one particular topic, right? In this subject, okay? So topic are those lecture topic here, okay? So one question will be related to just one topic, okay? So it's easier for you to think of what to study, okay? So there are 5 questions, right? That means there are 5 topics, okay? So in order to let you to be more focused, okay, better prepare. So those topics are very much related to, there are 4 questions, right, related to EIA process, okay? So the first process is the screening, okay, screening process. And then the second process is the scoping, okay, scoping process. And then the impact prediction and evaluation process, okay. And finally, right, the environmental monitoring and audit process, okay. So that you can see that these are the major 4 processes in EIA, okay. So I think this is not too difficult for you, right? Because if you have gone through the notes, right, and you attend the class, you should have some idea, right? You know some points, right, to write already. And if you prepare your group projects, right, and your topic is about the EIA system, okay, so then you will have much better, right, also concept in this particular steps involved. So now we have 4 process, right, and then we have 5 questions, right. So the last is important topic is air and noise impact analysis, right. So I think most of you work for construction projects, right? So air and noise impacts, right, are the major types of problem, right, that you need to deal with in your work. So the air and noise impact analysis, right? So we use this, we introduce this topic, right, to illustrate the overall process of EIA, right? So after knowing that we have air quality impacts, then we have to, what we need to do, right? Remember the steps involved for the air and noise impact analysis. Basically, they are very similar, okay? So go through the steps. So remember, for all these processes, okay, screening, scoping, impact prediction, evaluation, ENA, or even the air and noise impact analysis, right? So you have to know the principle and purpose, right, or the objective, why we need to carry out those processes, right? And also, what are the steps involved, okay, the detailed steps, and the methodology, okay, the methodology for carrying out those processes. So these are important, okay, except the methodology for impact prediction, right, with those numerical calculations, right, those are not that important, okay, not important for your exam. Okay, so now 5 topics, 5 questions, and you only need to answer 4, okay? So you can think about what topics to focus, okay? So do you have any particular question, any question you'd like to ask about the topics or about the arrangement for the exam? Yeah. 係。係啦。嗱，其實咧， 首先要知道點解我哋有 EM&A 啦，係咪？跟住個 process 同埋個 practices 咧，其實就喺後面嘅，即係我哋要 formulate 個 process。其實我哋後來 come up 係咪就係一個environmental management plan 或者一個 event action plan？OK， 即係其實係 prepare 呢樣嘢嘅嚇。咁如果做嗰啲 plan，其實咧每個人有啲咩 responsibility， 同埋佢哋做啲咩咧？咁嗱，首先大家要知道 event action plan 啦，係咪？我哋要 set 我哋要有個 limit level 同埋 action level 嘅要 set。咁大家要知道呢個概念啦，係咪？點解要 set 嘅？係咪？我哋要 monitor 嘅 environment 啊嘛。咁monitoring 其實咧個 process start from baseline monitoring， 跟住咧就係 compliance monitoring 嘅。OK。咁而喺之間咧，我哋需要 plan 呢個 work 噶嘛咁我哋需要 set 呢個 action and limit level。咁只要知道嗰個 idea 係咩就得噶啦，就唔使話記air， 譬如 air quality 個 action limit 同埋 action level limit level 點 set 㗎？呢啲唔使嘅 ，OK， 唔使記嘅。咁但係咧要知道點解我哋 set 嗰個 level， 跟住咧每個人做啲咩㗎？喺成個 monitoring 嘅 process。咁其實咧大家可以睇下呢個 flow chart 啦，咁有啲 idea 我哋做個 process 係點。咁另外咧就係睇其中一個呢啲event action plan 就得㗎啦。基本上佢都講晒，萬一個喺 monitoring 嘅時候有啲咩 discrepancy 嘅時候，唔同嘅 stakeholders 佢有咩 responsibility 嘅。咁大家譬如淨係睇呢個 air quality 咁已經好足夠㗎啦，就已經可以知道成個數㗎啦。咁另外咧後邊亦都要講下啦，即係有啲咩 stakeholders 啦，佢哋個 role 係啲乜嘢啦，同埋咧仲有就係 organizational structure 啦。我哋點樣去 organize 啲人嘅？咁喺唔同 type 嘅 project 咧，我哋適用於用點樣去 structure 呢班嘅 stakeholders 啦。咁呢啲都係同嗰個process 有關嘅。有冇啲咩嘢想問啊？清唔清楚？EM&A manual 咧，嗰啲 content 咧就唔需要記住佢嘅，係啦。記住就係個 principle， 即係個 purpose 係啲乜嘢，每一個 process 個 purpose 係乜嘢，跟住咧個 process 係點啦，個 method 係點啦。如果有唔同嘅 stakeholders， 好似 EM&A 有人喺度嘅，嗰啲人嘅角色係乜嘢咧？呢幾點每一個 process 都係咁嘅，即係每一個 steps 都係咁嘅。好，有冇其他嘢想問咧？所以考試咧係冇計數嘅 ，OK， 唔使帶計數機嘅，冇數計嘅。留意下咧，譬如講嗰個 process 咧，譬如 scoping 啦scoping 咧嗰個 method 咧，其實有啲可能會喺其他度嘅，即係我哋講 methodology 嗰度，即係 measurement methodology 我哋可以去返個 file 先。譬如measurement methodology 嗰度有 impact identification 嗰啲 method 嘅 ，OK， 即係 scoping 啦嘅 method 嘅。咁所以咧，大家 one scoping 咧就要睇翻呢度啲 method 嘅喎，就唔好 miss 咗咁亦都講譬如air， 如果譬如 air and noise 嗰個impact analysis 啦，咁其實其中一 part 咧講 mitigation 嘅，咁咧就喺譬如之前個 tutorial construction impacts and mitigation measures 嗰度有講嘅咁呢個係construction stage 啦 ，air air and noise 啦，同埋 water 嘅。咁所以其實大家都應該要溫埋即係呢一個 mitigations method 嘅，因為佢係 specific to air and noise 嘅。咁咯。OK， 咁所以咧嗱 ，topics wise 咧嚇，就係嗰4個 嗰4個 process 啦，係咪？同埋咧嗰個air and noise impact analysis 咁啦。OK， 即係你溫嘅時候就應該 focus 喺呢5個 topic 度嘅。OK。咁啊嗱。有大家考試有2個鐘啦，應該仲有大概10零日嘅時間，你哋好似14號考試係咪？咁啊有10日到嘅時間啦。咁咧你有2個鐘頭去做喎，咁所以咧4條題目，每條咧大概就有30分鐘嘅啫。咁30分鐘裏邊咧，你要攞25分。咁大家可能過去考試都有經驗啦，其實1分咧大約等於1個 point 到嘅，即係攞一個 point 咧，大約攞到1至2分嘅，係咪？咁啊 ，depend on 嗰個 point 嘅長短啦。如果嗰個 point 需要 elaborate 長啲嘅喎，咁可能1個 point 就有2分嘅，係咪？如果係短嘅 point 咧，1個 point 通常係1分嘅啫。咁所以你諗下啦，咁考試啲題目咧，今次啲題目嗰5題咧，每一題咧，可能會有得1 part 或者多至3 part 嘅。咁咧，大家就睇餸食飯啦，即係睇分去作答啦。OK， 咁你知道，譬如一題分成3 part，可能有啲10分，有啲10幾分咁樣，係咪？咁你就睇下究竟嗰 part 有幾多分，咁你諗下自己大概咧要答幾多個 point 落去啦，得唔得？但亦都要預時間啦，係咪先？因為30分鐘，如果真係哇好快嘅 point 嚟嘅，咁啊要答25個 point 嘅，咁你都預啲時間寫咁啊，都係要。OK， 咁啊，大家可以去即係喺溫習嘅過程嚟到亦都諗下究竟會點樣問㗎？問啲乜嘢啊？咁樣啊，亦都可以睇翻過往嘅 past paper 啦，去試下作答啦。其實都好 straightforward 嘅啫，今次嗰啲問題啊，咁樣係啦，冇錯。嗱，你之前咧嗰個 air and noise impact analysis 啦，咁其實咧主要係 follow 翻嗰啲 general process 嘅，咁即係呢幾個 steps 嘅6個 steps 啦嚇，即係成個 flow 係點做嘅。我哋做呢啲study 嘅時候air impact study 嘅時候 ，noise 亦都係嘅，基本上差唔多嘅啫 ，noise 同埋呢個air，OK， 咁佢當中咧講到去impact prediction method 嘅時候咧，介紹嗰啲 numerical method， 大家唔需要記嘅 ，OK， 但係俾個概念大家啫，等你知道哦，原來啲人係會咁做嘅。咁其實嗰啲係啲 environmental engineer 做嘅，唔係你哋做嘅。咁啊，你哋最緊要就係知道under 呢個 EIAO， 咁對於我哋一個 project 嚟講，我哋有啲咩要 fulfill 嘅，有啲咩會被影響，我哋要去做嘅，咁樣嘅啫。係air and noise 都重要嘅。OK， 嗱，咁咧大家可以諗下啦，即係自己，譬如你做咗 project 咧，譬如做咗 group project， 咁你做咗嗰飯通常都會熟啲㗎啦，係咪先？咁咪諗下，即係考試都溫嗰一飯咯，即係同你做 project 有關啲嘅嗰一飯咯。好，有冇其他嘢想問嘅 ？online 嘅同學有冇嘢想問啊？OK， 好，我諗大家應該都輕鬆好多㗎啦。 咁啊，大家俾心機去做咧，因為啲問題都比較 straightforward 嘅啫，最緊要大家清咗個 concept 係咪？我哋都考你個 concept 嘅啫啊。因為你之後都唔係落手落腳做嗰個㗎啦，係咪？最緊要知道點解我哋要咁做，去到個 project 嘅時候，點解我冇做乜要做呢啲嘢㗎？啊，點嚟㗎？究竟背後個原因係乜嘢啊？咁樣啊。OK， 好，咁啊，如果冇問題咧，咁我哋喺我哋做埋最後2場 present 之前咧，嗱，大家幫手做個SFQ 啦。咁啊，大家去呢條 link， 用你嘅電話啦，或者你嘅電腦打呢條 link。嗱，我抄落去 online 個 chat room 度先。大家如果喺個 online 同可以撳呢條 link 啦，嚟到去做嘅。咁啊，大家10分